They slay demons. They top the charts. And somehow, nobody saw them coming. Back in June 2025, an animated movie landed on Netflix that looked like a fun little musical about a K-pop girl group fighting monsters. But the truth behind K-pop Demon Hunters is wilder, messier, and way more insane than anything you saw on that screen. The whole idea started over lunch in 2018 and was bought by Sony within a week. The original villain was supposed to be a flamboyant comedy character until everything changed overnight. And the movie almost never had any K-pop in it at all. But that's only the beginning. From wild production secrets to facts that will completely change how you watch the film, K-pop Demon Hunters has been hiding some unbelievable stories since day one. So today, let's have a look at 15 crazy facts about K-pop Demon Hunters. Number 15. Most animated movies take years just to get out of the brainstorming phase. K-pop Demon Hunters skipped that step entirely. In 2018, director Maggie Kang and her husband Radford Seacrest, an animator and Netflix creator himself, were having lunch together when Seacrest threw out an idea. What if Korean mythology and K-pop were combined into one story? Kang immediately felt something click. She had spent 12 years working in Hollywood animation and had never once worked on a single Korean project. Here was a concept rooted entirely in her own heritage, her own childhood, and her own love of K-pop. She knew what it was the moment she heard it. The idea was pitched to Sony Pictures Animation and was bought so fast that Kang later described the timeline as almost unbelievable. Within 1 week of that lunch, the concept had a home at one of the biggest animation studios in the world. What makes it even more wild is that the lunch conversation almost did not happen the way it did. Kang had been thinking about Korean demonology for years before that day, but she could never figure out what else the story needed. It was Seacrest who dropped in the K-pop element that made the whole thing suddenly explode into something undeniable. One lunch, one idea, 1 week, and the rest became Netflix history. Number 14. Sold in a week. In theaters, 9 years later. That math does not add up until you understand what happened in between. After Sony bought the concept in 2018, the production went through years of development, script rewrites, tone adjustments, and creative evolution. The film that audiences eventually watched on the 20th of June 2025 looked and felt completely different from the version that was first being developed in the early years of production. The budget changed, the tone changed, the target audience changed. The villain changed completely. Even the scale of the whole project grew dramatically as the team realized what they were building. Full production with the complete creative team officially attached did not begin until March 2021, which means the final animated film was produced in roughly 4 years. But the concept, the development, the research trips, the musical development, and the years of building the world of Hunter X stretches all the way back to that lunch conversation in 2018, 9 years from idea to screen. The people watching it on Netflix in under 2 hours had no idea how long those 2 hours took to exist. Number 13. Here is something that makes the whole story even more insane. The person responsible for Netflix's most watched animated film of all time had never directed a feature before K-pop Demon Hunters. Kang had spent over a decade working at some of the biggest animation studios in the world: DreamWorks, Warner Animation, Illumination. She worked as a story artist on films like Rise of the Guardians, Kung Fu Panda 3, Puss in Boots, and Trolls. She was head of story on the Lego Ninjago movie. She had been inside the machine for years, learning every part of how major animated films get made. But K-pop Demon Hunters was her first time sitting in the director's chair on a feature. Her debut, her first shot, and she aimed it directly at Korean mythology, K-pop idols, and a story that no one in Hollywood animation had ever attempted before. The film went on to win 2 Academy Awards, 2 Golden Globes, and become the most watched Netflix film in the history of the platform. Not a bad way to announce yourself as a feature director. Number 12. The terrifying, soul-stealing Demon King Guima that audiences watched in the final film was not always the version of the villain the creators had in mind. In the early stages of development, the character of Guima was written with a completely different energy. He was conceived as flamboyant, over-the-top, and comedic, closer to a theatrical villain who chewed the scenery than a genuinely menacing threat. And the filmmakers had a very specific person in mind for that version of the role. Park Jin-young, one of the most iconic and celebrated figures in K-pop history, was the original choice to voice the character. But as the story developed and the tone evolved, Guima became darker, more dangerous, and genuinely frightening. The comedic villain concept was dropped entirely, and with that shift, the casting changed too. Park Jin-young was out. Lee Byung-hun, one of South Korea's most acclaimed dramatic actors, was brought in to play the character straight as a properly terrifying antagonist. The change completely transformed the final act of the film, and the version of Guima that made it to the screen is far more effective because of it. But somewhere in an alternate universe, there is a version of this movie where a K-pop legend is playing the Demon King for laughs. Number 11. This one sounds impossible, but it is completely true. The concept that became the entire identity of the film, the thing that is literally in the title, was not the original starting point of the story. Maggie Kang has said publicly that her first idea was purely rooted in Korean demonology. She had grown up terrified of the Josung Saja, the Grim Reaper figures of Korean folklore, and she wanted to build a story around that mythology. A group of incredible women who hunt demons. That was the original pitch. But as Kang worked on it, she kept feeling like something was missing. The demon hunting concept was compelling, but it was not quite enough on its own to become the larger, more spectacular kind of film she wanted to make. It was only when K-pop entered the picture that everything snapped into place. She described the moment K-pop was added as the point when the movie instantly became larger in scale, became a musical, and became the kind of spectacle that could cross cultural barriers all over the world. The thing that made it a global phenomenon was almost never part of it. The film that broke every Netflix record came within one conversation of being a very different movie. Number 10. On the surface, the Saja Boys look like a stylish K-pop boy band, but their name is one of the most cleverly layered pieces of world building in the entire film. In Korean, the word Saja can mean lion. And if you look at the Saja Boys' branding, their logo, their imagery, and their aesthetic, lion symbolism is threaded through all of it. That alone works as a surface-level reference to the kind of powerful, masculine energy that K-pop boy bands often project in their image. But there is a second meaning that changes everything. In Korean folklore, Josung Saja are Grim Reaper figures, whose specific job is to escort the souls of the dead into the afterlife. They are traditionally depicted wearing a black hanbok and a gat, which is the wide-brimmed traditional Korean hat. And if you look at the Saja Boys in their demon forms throughout the film, that is exactly what they are wearing. The name is not just cool branding, it is a folklore reference hiding in plain sight, telling you exactly what these characters are and what they are doing to the fans whose souls they are stealing. The whole demon boy band concept is built on top of a piece of genuine Korean mythology that most audiences outside Korea would walk right past without realizing what they were seeing. Number 9. Maggie Kang was not willing to make a film about Korean culture from a distance. In 2022, she gathered her core creative team, including co-director Chris Applehands and production designer Mingjue Helen Chin, and took them all to Korea. They did not just visit tourist landmarks, they went deep. The team spent time at Gwangjang Market, one of Seoul's oldest and most famous traditional markets. They visited Namsan Tower, Myeongdong Shopping District, Olympic Stadium, and Sansan Folk Village. They walked through Bukchon Hanok Village, the traditional neighborhood that was later chosen as the location for the first meeting between Rumi and Jinu in the film. Kang was very clear about why this trip was non-negotiable. You have to know Korea in order to show it the way it actually is. Every building in Seoul's skyline that appears in the film, every restaurant detail, every visual texture was informed by what the team saw and experienced in person. The authenticity was not accidental. It was the result of a deliberate commitment to getting everything right. The trip also reinforced something for Kang that she had felt her entire career. Korean culture had never been the center of a Hollywood animated feature. She was going to make sure that when it finally was, it looked like the real thing. Number 8. Here is something that surprises almost everyone who finds out about it. In K-Pop Demon Hunters, the characters have two separate performers. One person does the speaking voice, and an entirely different person does the singing. This is not unusual for animated musicals, but the way it was handled for this film was distinctive. The singers were actually cast before the voice actors. The music was being developed and recorded early in production, which meant the singing performances were locked in before the final speaking cast was even assembled. AJ, who provides the singing voice for Rumi, was initially brought onto the production purely as a songwriter. She was not meant to perform at all, but as she kept contributing to the demos and the directors kept hearing her voice on the recordings, she eventually was offered the role of Rumi's singing voice directly. She later described getting the part as the result of the directors simply getting used to hearing her voice in all the demos. Meanwhile, Arden Cho, who voices Rumi speaking, originally auditioned for a completely different character. She tried out for a role called Celine before co-director Maggie Kang personally encouraged her to audition for Rumi instead. The lead character of the biggest Netflix film of all time was almost voiced by a completely different actress who had initially been trying out for someone else. Number 7. When the time came to develop the soundtrack, producer Agnes Lee at Sony Pictures Animation had a very specific instinct about who needed to make this music. She thought about the music of 2NE, ONE, and Blackpink while reading the script, and that thought led directly to one name: Teddy Park. Teddy Park is the producer and songwriter behind some of the biggest K-pop hits in history. He is the main creative force behind the Black Label, a subsidiary of YG Entertainment, and his fingerprints are on the sound of Blackpink and 2NE ONE, among many others. Getting him and his team meant that the music in K-Pop Demon Hunters would not sound like someone trying to imitate K-pop from the outside. It would have the actual DNA of the genre built into every track. Kang described going to bona fide K-pop hitmakers to ensure that the DNA of K-pop music was the primary concern. The results speak for themselves. The song Golden reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. The soundtrack became the first in the history of the chart to have 4 songs in the top 10 simultaneously. It won the Grammy for Best Song Written for Visual Media and the Oscar for Best Original Song. They did not fake the K-pop, they hired the people who invented it. Number 6. When people talk about Netflix's biggest movies, they usually think of huge action blockbusters or massive franchise films. K-Pop Demon Hunters is an original animated musical that nobody outside the production had ever heard of before 2024, and it destroyed every record Netflix had. With over 325 million views, K-Pop Demon Hunters became not just the most watched Netflix animated film of all time, but the most watched Netflix film period. It beat every live-action film the platform had ever released. It ranked number 1 in 41 countries. It hit that top spot within days of premiering. Maggie Kang has said that by day 5 or 6, she was scrolling Twitter at 2 in the morning Los Angeles time when she noticed the conversations starting to shift into Korean as Korea woke up. That was the moment she realized how global it had actually become. The film also pulled off something that Pixar could not do the same week. Elio, the Pixar film released in theaters on the exact same day K-Pop Demon Hunters hit Netflix, recorded the lowest opening weekend in Pixar history. An original animated film with no franchise recognition and no bankable Hollywood stars had just outperformed the studio behind Toy Story, Finding Nemo, and The Incredibles on the same weekend. Now be sure to smash that like button if you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another video like this one. Got any cartoon or animated film recommendations you want us to cover next? Drop them in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.